Welcome to episode 21 of the Civic Pulse with David Bonnier and Brian Brady. So good to see you. We are doing a sort of a impromptu show because Pope Francis has passed away. And I think we have one of the best guests we could possibly have on this show, which is David Bonnier, who's written a book about papal succession, is a longtime Catholic, is on the board of the Catholic Reporter, and thinks about Catholic issues and politics also from a Catholic lens. So David, thanks for joining and being willing to share your wisdom on Francis's legacy and the next steps for the church.
You're welcome. Thanks for interviewing me on our show.
We always have a great guest available. It's a wonderful thing. Walk back to 12 years ago, Francis, was a groundbreaking papal selection from Latin America. And if you read the one paragraph or one sentence on him, dramatically more inclusive and a focus on the poor and the marginalized, in really an authentic way and at a very humble approach to the papacy.
Yeah.
What did you love about this Pope and in his record of 12 years?
Well, he was a complete surprise to me as he was to many others in being elected. He was a head of the bishops in Argentina and I think Uruguay or Paraguay. I can't remember. I always get those two countries mixed up. But anyway, the Jesuit area that included the country next to Argentina.
I think it was Uruguay, yeah.
Uruguay, yeah. So anyway, he was the leader of the Jesuits in that area, and then he became a bishop, and then we made a cardinal, and he was considered an inclusive, as you said, progressive priest and bishop, and he was one who believed in being with his flock. He lived a very unpretentious life. He carried his own bags. He took the subway. I should tell our viewers, I wrote a book about this. I wrote a novel, actually.
A great novel. I loved it.
A modern novel. I just happen to have it.
I think there's one copy left on Amazon. So
it spells when mercy seasons justice, which is a quote from Shakespeare. But and there's a picture of the Pope that actually I paid someone to do a drawing for because I thought it was marvelous. He was a good drawer, and then there's
that's a beautiful cover. Yeah,
it's a nice book. Anyway, so I pay attention to Catholic politics and faith, and so I did this book that I really enjoyed doing and got a lot out of and learned a lot about as well. He was a man who, was a relatively large Italian family. They migrated to Argentina, eventually got to Argentina, and he grew up there. He loved, like most kids, teenagers, he loved to play soccer, watch soccer. He loved the tango, he loved to dance. He was just a regular person, but who really felt he had a calling to the church, and ended up becoming a priest and going to the seminary and the whole route, and was a very surprise pick as Pope. Not very many people thought that was going to happen, but it did, and he, I think, was a great Pope in terms of he included a lot of people. He broke that barrier of exclusion, which has been actually a trademark, unfortunately, of the church for many, many centuries, let alone decades. I mean, when I was growing up in school, we were taught that, if you weren't Catholic, you couldn't get to heaven and all of that nonsense stuff. And and he opened the doors, and he was part of the Vatican II movement that opened the doors of the church and to everybody, and except at certain stages. And that was one of the issues that he had to deal with, whether or not women could move on in the church into leadership positions. Well, he made them leaders in certain areas, and then he had a commission to look at question of whether they could get what they call holy orders. And that is a step of becoming a priest. And one of that step is becoming a deacon. In this case, it would be a deaconite to a woman. And so that was very threatening, I think, to a lot of Catholic prelates, bishops or cardinals. But he did it anyway, and they had the commission, and they just didn't have the people, couldn't get together on a position to present that would allow it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But on the question of inclusion with on sex and gender, he was on gender especially. He was good. He was good on the LGBTQ issues, and
blessed gay marriages and encouraged to
bless the priest could bless them. And so he made significant strides there, but his really significant interest was on immigration, for immigrants, and for the poor, and the marginalized. But immigration, he was huge on. I mean, he took in a family that was in a camp, internment camp in Syria. Brought them to the Vatican and housed them there, to set an example. He went to Lampedusa, which is an island in the Mediterranean, right across from North Africa. It's an Italian, but it's very close to Africa. And all these folks were coming in, trying to get out of Libya, Sudan, and other countries, and drowning in the Mediterranean. Thousands and thousands of them. People maybe remember that. This was back in, 10 years ago, but it was horrific, just horrific. And he went there as well to meet them and talk to them, and worked very hard to get the Italian authorities to continue life-saving efforts to save them at sea and to open up their doors, which they did for a long while before they didn't. But he was significant in that as well.
We should add that he also took Trump and Vance to task on immigration as well, right?
He did. He took everybody in leadership positions who could do something and weren't doing something to task. He felt strongly about that, and wisely about it, I think, as well.
And ironically, Vance sees him less than 24 hours before he dies. And
right.
I would have liked to have been a fly on the wall of that conversation.
Yeah.
We're not conspiracy theorists. We don't think he killed him. But Vance has that effect on people. He can kill.
Well, anyway, he did do that. But he did a lot of firsts. He was the first Jesuit. He was the first South American. He was the first prelate or pope to wash the feet of a woman, and that may sound insignificant to you or strange, but in the church it's a big deal. It's a ceremony that Christ performed at the Last Supper and other places. But so it's significant, the first that he did. I mean, he did an amazing amount of travel. He was he's appointed 73% of the people who became cardinals and who are 80 and under. He appointed 73% of them who are eligible to vote at this next conclave, which is the groupings of coming together to elect the next pope. So
before we get to that, though, I don't want to make you tear up, but you had me watch the 5-year-old boy Emanuele, the video on YouTube. It's only 5 minutes long. It's just a quintessential Francis moment. Can you describe it to folks?
Yeah, it's a true story. It's absolutely true, and you can watch it on YouTube. So Emanuele is a 9-year-old boy with his class from a working class neighborhood in Rome, and they come to a probe comes to his neighborhood, and the class is prepped to ask him some questions and all of that. And so they get to the site, and he's sitting with his class, Emanuele, and the Pope comes and sits down, and next to the Pope, sitting down on a kind of a not very high platform, but
a little elevated.
little bit. Our two cardinals. So anyway, and the microphone where the children have to ask the question or statement to the Pope is about 30 feet away, which isn't very far. But it's for a kid, a 9-year-old kid. It's pretty scary to see this robed guy and these other two people next to him, but they were prepped and how kind and good the Pope was. So Emanuele was there at the microphone, and when the Pope came in, it was his turn to ask a question. He was, I think, the first one maybe, but he froze. He just couldn't ask. He couldn't ask the question. He couldn't ask the question, and finally he broke down, put his hands, and started to cry. Well, there's a priest next to him who was trying to console him, but wasn't getting there. So finally, the Pope, who was very close, 30 feet away, says, come to me. So with a little encouragement from the priest, the boy moves towards the Pope. And when they get together, the Pope and the boy embrace. And they hug. And they're there, and they're hugging, and the two cardinals at each side are just enthralled. They're looking at this and wondering what's going on. They can hear a little bit of it. They're whispering back and forth to each other in the ear. And so after a while, what happens is the boy then goes back to his seat. When he gets there, he puts his hands in his face again. But the Pope then addresses the crowd, who are, it's a lot of tension building up, and what's this all about? And the Pope tells the crowd that he's been talking with Emanuele, and he had an important question to ask. And with his permission, I've asked him, with his permission, I'm going to tell you what he asked and what I told him. Then the Pope tells him that Emanuele tells him that his father has, I think, 3 or 4 kids, I can't remember, brothers and sisters, 4 of them. And his father had died recently, passed away. And Emanuele is wondering whether or not his father is in heaven. The Pope addresses the question this way, basically saying, God determines who will go to heaven or not. But the boy tells the Pope his father was a non-believer, but he had all of his children baptized, all 4 of them. So the Pope says, basically to the crowd, that he relays this, and he says, Emanuele's father, well, what kind of a God do we have? We have a God, he says, that's like a father. That's what the God is like. And so basically, God is like a father, and he loves his children. Would the God who loves his children and the father be that far away from him after they died? And the upshot of all of this is he works up to basically say that your father, Emanuele, is a good man, was a very good man. And it's easier for believers to have their children baptized than non-believers to have their children baptized. Mm-hmm. So he has that, working for him, going for him. and basically he says, that he would be with him eventually because God would not separate them because he's a father and he knows the pain of that. So anyway, why it's significant is that in theological terms, and I'm not a theologian, so I just dance around this, but it's just an amazing inclusion of a new group of people, non-believers, with the hope of getting to heaven. So anyway, I thought there'd be a firestorm after this, and there really wasn't, as much as I thought there was a little, but not a big firestorm from people in the church. who, believe that, you got to be a believer if you want to get to heaven. Anyway, that's you have to watch it because it's even more emotional to watch it. I've just finished writing.
If your eyes stay dry after watching that video, you are either Elon Musk or Donald Trump. It's impossible not to cry during that one.
Yeah. So it's a very, very emotional and wonderful piece, and I was really taken with it. At that time, I was searching around for someone to really look up to. I wasn't finding it anywhere in politics or in business. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I wasn't finding it in the church either. I mean, there are a couple bishops that I really love. Father Bishop Gumbleton from Detroit, who passed away. He was really beloved by people who care about peace and justice. And then there's Father Bishop Gudziak, who's the Ukrainian, ministers to the Ukrainian diaspora in the United States, and is president of the Ukrainian University as well. Incredibly decent, generous guy, thoughtful guy, smart guy. But beyond that, I mean, there's nobody grabbed me. So, but when he came along, I watched him. Just, you want to find out really who these people are. And he seemed to stand up on issues that really mattered to me of justice and peace. And he was a good mixture of the things we all learned as Catholics in school, the acts of faith, hope, and love. He had the right formula for that. So and then I decided to write a book about him. So that's how I got interested.
I remember in your book, you're sort of a great author to describe the politics of it, because you were a whip and you had to count your votes and gather your votes. And in the end, the conclave is just a voting exercise and counting votes.
Right,
and I remember there was something about the Pope having had appointed at that time when you wrote the book 50% or 51% of the bishops. It was getting to the, and then he hung on some more years and got up to 72%.
73%, yeah.
73%.
We'll
see. We know a lot of those. We know that there's an opposition out there to what we would call a progressive church, right? And he was called a heretic by some right-wing Catholics, right? There's a whole. Do you want to speak for a second about the I don't like to call them conservative. I think I would call them more the right-wing side of the church and how they label.
Well, they sort of mirror the country. There are conservative Catholics, and then there are really far right Catholics, and there's progressive Democrats, and there are a few far left Catholics as well. But I mean, we're pretty much span the spectrum. The thing is, though, that a lot of the appointments that Pope Francis made to become bishops and cardinals, the vote in this conflict that's coming up in about 2 weeks in Rome, all the cardinals from around the world will come to Rome. But you can only vote if you're 80 years of age or younger. Or under.
Oh, you can't vote if you're over 80.
That's right. That's relatively new, but that's how Francis got elected too, under those same rules. So you gotta be 80 or under 80, I think. And so they will meet during their meal time. They'll probably have a social time, and they'll talk amongst each other. And somehow they get down to some certain number of candidates, and they will then go line up and march into the Sistine Chapel, where they will have the election. And it's often goes on for days. Sometimes it went on for weeks. Used to go on for weeks until you've got to have 2/3 of the votes. And I think there's roughly maybe 120 something in that who are eligible to vote. So you've got to have 2/3 of 120, which is, I don't know, is it 80? It's
80 votes. Yeah,
that's maybe 80 votes, something like 80 votes. So we'll see. But what happened is they nominated, or I should say, the Pope Francis nominated a lot of new members from south of the equator, in Asia and Africa and South America. So that's a mix. Now, in terms of progressivism, they're pretty decent on economic stuff, but on social issues, not so much, especially on social issues that revolve around sexuality, like abortion and celibacy and women's ascendancy in the church to become priests. They're not real great on that. So we'll have to see what shakes out of all of this.
They mirror the cultural conservatism of those geographies. It's kind of what, right? As Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local, right?
Yeah.
It's true in the church as well, right?
Yes.
And now we say all politics is national because of Trump, right? Where everything's framed in
well,
this.
you have a very good cardinal in your area, Kupich.
Yeah, I think they say Supich here, if I'm correct, but pretty pretty progressive.
Pretty progressive guy. And there's another one out of Newark who used to be the pastor of a great large parish in southeastern Detroit, where your son lived, I believe, around that area. Oh God, what is Cardinal Tobin?
Joe Tobin, right?
Yeah, Joe Tobin. Yeah, he's an amazing guy, and I like him very much too. He was close to Francis, as was Supich.
I remember in your novel that the interesting thing about your novel is that you weave in the fictional characters with real characters.
I do.
That's and Joe.
Yeah.
Tobin is a heroic figure in your novel there.
Oh, he is. He took the sides of the nuns against the conservatives in the government at that time, under Benedict. Yeah.
I loved reading that book, your book, and just getting an inside glimpse of how raw politics is in the church. It's also a very spiritual place, above the fray at times.
Right.
But when it comes down to power, it doesn't operate very differently than other realms, right?
No, it doesn't. No.
What else? Any other? Do you think there's a geographic disposition? I heard, if you watch the movie Conclave, which you and I have seen, I think we both like what was nice about that movie for me is just it gave you the visualization of how it happens and the process and how the politics is played a bit. I didn't love the ending. Some people love the ending but I just felt it was too Hollywood. But it was powerful.
We can't tell the ending.
We can't say. Watch it.
It's very interesting. It's very up to date ending. So I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, I'm sure on Netflix it's gone from 105 to number one today, right? But anyway, it gives you a good view of that. Do you think that there's Africa deserves the next pope? Asia deserves the next pope? Is it sort of like the Olympics? We need to rotate geographies to be inclusive?
Well, for centuries it was just Italian popes, and for centuries, and that started to change a bit in the terms of these people who could vote. What percent of them were not Italians? And so the Italians have about 40% of the cardinals. Still a lot. More so than other places, but it's possible to obviously elect somebody, well, at least as they did with Francis, who was from South America, from Argentina. So that's possible to happen again. Will it happen in Asia or Africa? Hard to say. They by themselves don't have the numbers to get there. They would need a coalition of people from other regions, but we'll see.
And Pope Francis's real name was Jorge Mario Bergoglio, so he had a little Italian in him, which probably helped him a little bit with those Italian voters.
One of the reasons I attribute in my novel is to him not being more select than who he put on the commission on
women becoming deacons was because he was from an Italian family, and they're old fashioned, and in many ways on men and women issues. So hard to break that sometimes.
That is
What you get from your family. So
my mother, I was raised Catholic, and my mother was kind of a strict Catholic, but she died a Catholic, but her theology and belief in the system had changed pretty radically by the time she passed. And I think she's the only person I know who was able to convince the Northwestern Catholic Chapel to have her service there, but not to have the priest conduct the service.
oh wow,
that's a forceful leader who can do that.
Yeah. Well, now we know where you get it from.
The priest got up and spoke. He's like, I don't think she wanted me to speak, but I have to say a few words here.
That's good. What parish was she in? Do you remember?
She was in the more traditional parishes, and she even in the early 60s, she found my dad reading Catch-22 and threw it away. She was like, pretty buttoned down Catholic, but then she lived the feminist movement and became a political leader and and just came with the sex abuse scandal, just got disgusting.
Yeah, overwhelmingly disgusting. Yeah, and that's the poison that did not, but came very close to doing the church in. I mean, it's irreparable harm in the United States. When I was in the Congress, 25% of the population in the United States was Catholic. Today, that number is down to less than 20%. Not very much less, but down 5 or 6 points. So it's going in the wrong direction, and we need to change that. But until the church becomes more open on some of the sexuality issues, celibacy, women becoming priests, definition of abortion and when it's allowable, all those kinds of things, it ain't going to happen.
I will come back to the church. Maybe Cardinal Supich is watching this. If they bring women back, if they let women become priests, I'll come back. But I think people like me, the progressives, have drifted.
Well, that was kind of on this book. That was one of the sub themes of the book, was whether or not they were going to get that shot. And so I just took it into my hands that I studied for the seminary 1 year, but I never got there. So I have no say in really what goes on with the church.
You're a little bit more of a theologian.
I could write a novel, and I made 5 women. I'll give that away. I made 5 women cardinals for the first time in this book.
I went on Amazon, and I think there's one copy for $10 left. It's a great read, so I recommend it. Hey, before we sign off, David, in the spirit, since Francis was a hero of yours, we weren't entirely pleased with him, you and I, on Ukraine, but nobody's perfect. I kind of would have rather had John Paul II on Ukraine.
Oh yeah.
He understood the Russian militaristic culture.
Yes. But he did some things on Ukraine that were okay, but he could have been more, could have been stronger on it. Let's put it that way. And in terms of his church, in terms of supporting programs in Ukraine, the Caritas is the charitable arm of the Catholic Church, and it has like 30-some centers throughout Ukraine in which they take care of everybody, not just Catholics, and they do fabulous work. So I mean, there were some good things that Francis did even in Ukraine.
Yeah. Well, let's start a new segment in honor of Francis called Hero of the Week.
Yeah.
And we'll spin an optimistic story because we need heroes right now. I like your thought that Francis became a hero for you. So we might have the same hero this week. Who's your hero of the week?
This week?
Yeah.
Well, Francis. Yeah.
Francis. Well, I was thinking political hero. Francis, obviously. So who embodied the spirit of Francis other than Francis for you this week?
Oh, for this week, my gosh. Well, you go first, and I'll think about it while you talk.
I was thinking Van Hollen, Senator Van Hollen.
Oh,
from
yes.
Maryland. Yeah.
No question. Yeah. Perfect.
Because he didn't measure all the politics of going to El Salvador
Right.
and speaking out for this guy who doesn't have a perfect pass. Abrego is, I'm sure he's not MS-13 but he did have a restraining order. So he didn't calculate the politics. He just went and did the right thing and stood up.
He certainly did. And he's
due process.
Well, he was a great congressman when he was in the House.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling you this story a little earlier, that I wanted him to be right in line to succeed Pelosi. But I guess he couldn't wait. So he ended up, fortunately, there was a Senate seat open. I think it was Mikulski's seat. And he ran for that and won. He beat Tony Morello, who was a really good person, most progressive Republican we had. He beat her in Montgomery County to get into the House, and then won the Senate seat. And he's just been fabulous. He's a great guy. He's smart. He's articulate. He's tough. He's thoughtful. He make a good president.
These East Coast senators, Booker, Cory Booker, Chris Murphy, Van Hollen.
Yeah,
they're showing the fight we need right now.
Yeah,
right?
Pretty good trio. Yeah.
That is a good one. Well, let's make Senator Van Hollen the hero of the week.
Hero of the week.
We'll hopefully have another hero this week as well. But Dave, it's been great to talk to you about Pope Francis. You've taught me a lot about the Catholic Church over the years, so appreciate it.
Bless you.
All right. Take care.